What's up, goblins, and welcome to Oxygen Not Included. Today I want to show you in my little tutorial here how to produce refined phosphorus. And before we start with all these rooms you can already see in the background here and this whole process, I want to take one step back and show you what refined phosphorus actually is and how to obtain it in general. Refined phosphorus is a rather uncommon material which you can obtain by cooling down liquid phosphorus to 44.1 degrees Celsius. Mark this temperature, because to obtain liquid phosphorus, you have to, there we go, melt phosphorite, which on the other side is a very common resource. You can, for example, obtain by ranching Dracos to 244 degrees Celsius. And this leads to two conclusions. First, you need a lot of energy to melt your phosphorite into liquid phosphorus. And then on the other hand, you also need a very efficient cooling system to cool down your liquid phosphorus into refined phosphorus in time. Okay, now that we know how to obtain refined phosphorus in general, you will probably ask yourself, okay, but why on earth should I make this refining process even? Very simple. There is one purpose for refined phosphorus that makes it very valuable. So if we have a look on the database here, we can already see you need this to feed Azure bugs and Abyss bug, but there's actually, in my point of view, one even more important application to this, and that's the Geotuner. Exactly, you can enhance your metal volcanoes with refined phosphorus at your Geotuner. And for example, I enhanced this copper volcano by 50 degree and 1737 grams per second per Geotuner. And I can target this one copper volcano with 5 Geotuners at a time, leading to more than double the amount of output of this one single copper volcano here on my planetoid. Alright, now that all your imminent questions are cleared out, I of course want to show you my whole process here. But before we start with the actual process here, I have to tell you where all this energy is coming from. Because remember, we have to reach temperatures of 244 degrees or higher to even melt our phosphorite. And in my case, I chose to use my already existing volcano tamer. So this volcano tamer, as you can see, is my main source for power. I have a lot of steam turbines here to produce power for my colony. And I don't want to go too deep into this setup here. I'm just going to explain this very quickly. So if this volcano erupts, right now it is dormant, as you can see here, but if it erupts, it ejects a lot, and I mean a lot, of magma at very high temperatures. And now what happens, this magma blade forms, flows right in front of this window tile, and therefore heats up my steam room behind this window tile and my mechanized airlock here. And if this magma reaches a temperature below 1409 degrees Celsius, it will convert into solid igneous rock at exactly this temperature. And that's exactly where this energy is coming from, because I grab all this igneous rock and throw it right inside of the first room of my process here that I want to explain you. As you can see here, the igneous rock is sitting here at 1290 degrees Celsius, so it's extremely hot. It is not at 1400 degrees, because as you can see, I already pre-cooled the igneous rock coming out of this room inside my main steam chamber here. So this room, first of all, is my main heat chamber. So this is where I store all this heat in form of igneous rock. And I've also chose to put in a lot of hydrogen gas to conduct all of this heat, because hydrogen has very high heat conduction, at least in terms of gases. And I've also chose to throw this igneous rock on top of window tiles, in this case diamond tiles. And you have to be very careful. You cannot just build all these things here, insulated tiles, window tiles, out of every material. Because of these high temperatures, you need very, very high melting points for all materials you use. So your materials to go are, for example, here for my conveyor rails, I chose steel, exactly also for my conveyor chute. As window tiles, I choose diamond, and as insulated tiles, I chose obsidian. Coming to the second room, this is also a heat storage room. As you can see, the atmosphere here also made out of hydrogen gas. This time a little bit less pressure, only 8 kilograms per tile. In this here I had 19.7 kilograms per tile. And also I have some window tiles here on the left side of this room to conduct the heat coming from our first room here. And they are divided by a mechanized airlock. And this is the critical point, because as you can see here, as long as this mechanized airlock is opened up, there's a vacuum inside this mechanized airlock. And because we don't have real heat radiation inside this game, we also do not have any heat exchange between our left room and our right room as long as this mechanized airlock is opened. And that's the reason why I automated this with a thermosensor. So this thermosensor is set to 275 degrees Celsius. And what happens is, if we reach a temperature of over 275 degrees Celsius, this thermosensor will kick on, send a green signal, and thus open up this door, because this door opens when it receives a green signal. And as I said, as long as this stays open, there is no transfer inside this room here. And because this is the case, we have very stable temperatures inside here. So as you can see, we have 333 degrees Celsius. It is still too hot, so you cannot just put in all your equipment over here. This was, by the way, my first idea, to just throw in my liquid pump and everything inside this room here. But unfortunately, this is already a little bit too hot, so I decided to make one more heat storage room here for finer temperature control. Alright, now that we know where all this energy is coming from, I want to talk about my heating chamber here. This is where the actual magic happens and we start to melt our phosphorite into liquid phosphorus. Yes, finally. So this time, as you can see, I have polluted oxygen here as atmosphere. The reason behind that is the conductivity of polluted oxygen is a little bit lower. And we want to have lower conductivity inside this room because, remember, our steel pump has an overheat temperature of 275 degrees Celsius, while we still have to maintain this above 250 degrees inside this room to melt our phosphorite. And so we have to work in this very thin area between these two temperatures here to not melt our steel pump here. Okay, the rest of this room is very simple. I have some metal tiles here, tungsten to conduct heat from our second heat storage here inside this room. Then I have another steel mechanized airlock, also with a thermosensor set to above 250 degrees Celsius. Down below here I have some metal tiles as well, but they are this time made out of copper for a little bit lower conductivity, but still very high conductivity. And this is the most noticeable part. This time I don't have a metal tile or another window tile made out of diamond. No, this is just an ordinary sedimentary rock tile. And the reason behind that is, again, the conductivity. Because this time I don't want to have as much energy as possible floating this room all at once. No, I want to have a very fine temperature control and therefore also a very moderate heat exchange between my mechanized airlock and this one sedimentary rock tile. So as you already know, we have to cool down our liquid phosphorus to under 44 degrees Celsius in order to obtain refined phosphorus, and therefore it's very critical to cool down our liquid phosphorus fast, because as you can already see, this is a very automated process. So we really want to keep this loop active, and we really don't want to have more liquid phosphorus flowing into this room all over again. That's why we have to cool down this liquid phosphorus very fast, faster than we can actually melt our phosphorite. And that's why I chose to connect this to our cooling loop. This cooling loop is coming out of this room here from my thermo aqua tuner. And this thermo aqua tuner cools down our liquid. In this case, it is polluted water. Of course, you can also, if you have access to it, use supercoolant or something that has even better properties than polluted water. But polluted water is already very good because it has a very high specific heat capacity. That's why you can delete a lot of heat with polluted water. And yeah, this polluted water is now flowing inside one of my radiant liquid pipes, in this case made out of copper, through another window tile made out of diamond to hyper cool this down. And yeah, this cooling setup is now cooling down my liquid phosphorus on top of this. Once this is cooled down, our auto sweeper again can sweep out this, loading it into our conveyor loader, and this conveyor loader then is delivering this down inside a room that I will show you later. One thing that is critical here, and I have to mark, is if you pump in more than 140 kilograms worth of liquid phosphorus, this will happen. Exactly. A natural tile will form made out of refined phosphorus. And of course we want to prevent that, so that's why I'm only melting 120 kilograms here. And of course, also we want to know how to even deliver all this phosphorite into our room here. And that's why we come now to our last setup here. And that's a setup out of a conveyor shutoff and a conveyor meter. So this is a little more complicated in terms of automation. This conveyor shutoff is connected with an automation wire to this smart storage bin. That's the exact point where we want to have all of our refined phosphorus, because this is also the location where we need it for our geotuners. And therefore I chose to set this smart storage bin to 5,000 kilograms. And what happens is, once this smart storage bin is completely full, it will send a green signal. A green signal usually turns on your conveyor shutoff. So in this case, I have to convert the signal with a NOT gate. So as you can see here, the smart storage bin is not full, thus sending us a red signal. And this red signal is converted into a green signal, and then turning on our conveyor shutoff. Okay, so the second part of this small room here is our conveyor meter. Because I don't want to completely overload our system here. As I said, if you go to liquids over 140 kilograms, once you cool it down, you will form a natural tile. And this natural tile will, by the way, also completely block your liquid vent and therefore completely break your process. So what I want to do here, I have this conveyor meter. And this conveyor meter then ultimately delivers my phosphorite into this room. So the conveyor meter itself is set to amount of 110 units. And don't ask me why, but every time I use this conveyor meter, it either delivers 10 kilograms more than it should or 10 kilograms less, and I don't know why. That's why we have 120 kilograms worth of phosphorite lying inside this room here. But this is not a problem. As long as you stay under 140 kilograms, this will completely work, I can assure you. And this conveyor meter now is connected with this one timer sensor here. So what does the timer sensor do? The timer sensor is set to 1 second green duration and 200 seconds red duration. Every 201 seconds, this amount will reset, which means this conveyor meter is now able to deliver another 120 kilograms inside our heating room here. After the phosphorite is delivered, this conveyor meter will shut down. We will have this amount of 110 units lying around here, or in this case 120 units. And now we have exactly 200 seconds to fulfill our whole process here. That's why we have to be very careful with everything, going from temperature management to, of course, also shipping management. One thing I should also notice here is that, of course, all of this is part of my volcano tamer and therefore part of an even greater process, and that's why I have another method to ship out this igneous rock from my main heating chamber with this auto sweeper inside of this room here. I will show you in a second how this works. And this auto sweeper again will deliver this still very hot material. You can see we have igneous rock lying around here at 1300 degrees Celsius into our second steam room to generate even more power. And of course, igneous rock is also a great construction material you can use very often. Okay, how does this work? So the first thing I want to mention here is the weight plate. So as long as we have more than 2000 kilograms worth of igneous rock lying on top of this weight plate here, this weight plate will completely turn off my auto sweeper and my conveyor loader, and therefore they cannot deliver any new material to inside this room here. But once this turns on, my auto sweeper is able to sweep out this igneous rock and then delivers it over a small line inside this room here. Also note that even though this room is in theory closed, as you can see here, since we don't have one tile in this spot here, in this particular spot, this auto sweeper is still able to reach this igneous rock inside this room here. And that's very critical. So if you try to lock up this room here completely, you will not be able to reach this igneous rock anymore. You have to leave one tile free here in order to obtain this igneous rock. So now that we know everything about the theory behind this process, let's have a look on this in action. And of course, I want to wait until this this timer here hits 200 seconds and turns on green. So I see you in a few seconds. Okay, it's now only a few seconds to go until this conveyor meter turn on. Let's have a look on this. So now the clock turned on, which means our conveyor meter is active, delivering our first phosphorite inside this room here. You can already see the phosphorite is heating up immediately to very good temperatures here. 120 kilograms again. And now we have to wait until this reaches around 245 degrees Celsius to melt. Okay, we've surpassed 242 degrees Celsius here right now. Have a look on the timer. So the phosphorite should melt every second. Usually the phosphorite is melting a little bit more than its actual melting point, around 246 degrees. And this happens always around 140 to 160 seconds. Yeah, we made it this time a little bit earlier, actually, at 132 seconds. So now this is melting down into liquid phosphorus, and the liquid phosphorus is then pumped into our cooling room, where we will quickly cool down our liquid phosphorus with our liquid water here. With our polluted water, I mean. So the polluted water is coming in at around 10.8 degrees Celsius here and going out at 16 degrees then again. Also note that I'm cooling this region of my setup here. The reason behind that is they also produce at least some heat, and this heat might be enough to even melt your phosphorus once the auto sweeper delivers it into our conveyor loader. And then this conveyor loader might get stuck into liquid phosphorus as well. That's why you also have to keep this area here nice and chill. Okay, now that we are under the condensation point, we should reach our refined phosphorus very soon. Also here, take a look at the temperature. It was melting at around 40, not melting, converting into solid at 41 degrees Celsius. Now have a look on our clock. This usually happens between 80 seconds and 120 seconds. So this was also very quickly here. As you can see, this refined phosphorus is now shipped into our smart storage bin here. And there's one thing you have to be very careful of. If you have some heavy machineries running right next to your refined phosphorus, or where you want to ship your refined phosphorus through, there's a very good possibility that your refined phosphorus overheats and converts back into liquid phosphorus, because remember, the melting point of refined phosphorus is very low, only 44 degrees Celsius. So in this case, this is not a problem because I am shipping all of my refined phosphorus here through a cold biome, which means we already have some natural coolers here with words to cool down our refined phosphorus to very nice and chill 39 degrees Celsius. But yeah, either make sure that you ship your refined phosphorus through insulated tiles, or make sure that you have another cooling method to keep your refined phosphorus under 44 degrees Celsius. This is already it from my small guide. Of course, before we stop here, I have some very nice overlays here for you. First, the conveyor overlay for the shipping. So this is the part where our materials comes in. This is the part where our igneous rock flows in. This is the part where our igneous rock flows out. And then the last pipe here on the right side, this is the pipe we use to ship out our refined phosphorus. Then going to the automation overlay, we have our two thermosensors, then we have our timer sensor for the conveyor meter. This wire down here is connected to our smart storage, remember this one, and then we, as a last measure, in this very specific case, we also have a weight plate connected to our auto sweeper to sweep out the igneous rock from our first room. Then our plumbing overlay, this is very nice and short. We have our cooling pipe here coming from our thermo aqua tuner, and then our insulated liquid pipe from our liquid pump in our heating room. And as a last overlay, I want to show you my power overlay. All of this is connected with my large power transformer. Also note that most of the conductive wires here are made out of steel to also prevent them from heating up, especially if they are close to your first room, and preventing them from melting if they're made out of, let's say, for example, lead or something else. That's everything I have to say about this small guide here. Let me know what you think about this refined phosphorus process here, and if I was helpful for you. Of course, also let me know your enormous outputs of all of your own copper volcanoes. And I'll see you next time. Bye bye.